Good evening, everyone. Today is December 8th. This is Thursday evening, and this is the Goffstown Planning Board. This is our first regularly scheduled meeting of the month, and I believe it will be our only meeting this month. Oh,
Next week.
no, we have one next week, but we do not want to have one the 4th. So like November, we are having meetings 2 weeks in a row. Before we begin our business tonight, I will say I do not expect to have a long agenda tonight, and I would like to start by asking everybody here to identify themselves. And Jonathan, why don't we start with you?
I'm Jonathan Rourke, the Planning and Zoning Administrator.
I'm Chet Bowen, Planning Board Alternate.
David Pierce, Selectman's Representative.
Gail LeBrecq, alternate and recording secretary.
Barbara Griffin?
Philip Devanza.
Tim Redmond.
Jim Raymond.
Thank you, everybody. And for those of you who might have been following this from last week, Chet and Gail were sworn in to be alternate members before the meeting tonight, so they are sitting here in that capacity. As we continue, our first item are correspondence and action items, and that would be the Planning Board minutes of November 17th. That was our last meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'm second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining, everybody was here. So Chet would be abstaining. How many members do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Chet, why don't I appoint you instead of Michael tonight? And is that it?
And Kimberly.
And Kimberly? And so everybody is voting here tonight. So Gail does not have to abstain because she was not, because she was here, but you were not here in an official capacity, so you would be abstaining if you're not here at all, or such as happened last week. All right. The first item on our agenda is continued from November 10th, 2016. This is the final subdivision review hearing for a proposed two-lot subdivision creating one new lot. The owner is the John J. Stakovich. I'll leave that pronunciation with you, rather than butcher it again. Family Trust. It is at 520 Mast Road. It is zoned RSBO-2. This was continued. We had the application last week. There were some questions about the application itself and the capacity in which we got the application. Jonathan, why don't you take us through this?
We did receive the original certificate of authorization, and it has been notarized, so we do have that.
Okay,
now.
thank you. And we also got comments back from the engineer in regards to this. Are there any pending issues in regards to this? And who I see coming in the nick of time as we
I
talk.
apologize, Madam Chairman. I got stuck in that 293 traffic.
What happened? Is
It
it-
was backed up.
I think Adam said there was an accident from PTV.
Oh, okay. It's that time of year. Everybody's learning how to drive again. So Jonathan, your report for us starts on page 4. Why don't you take us through it?
It does. First, I just want to point out there is a typo under staff comments, the planning board comments. It should be, under number 1, it should be proposed subdivision map 21, lot 11. It reads map 2, so I just want to
Okay.
make sure everybody's aware of that. We started to go through it last week, then we found out the authorization was not complete, so that was a major stepping stone that has been completed. Other than that, speaking with Megan, the engineer, Wichard, has completed the request that we asked to complete as far as revisions of the map, revisions of site plan, excuse me. Megan did have a couple comments here to follow up from that from the last meeting, basically saying that they have been addressed, that drainage, she's not so concerned with that unless there's something presenting itself that is an issue. Also, development for regulations, it was a question last week about landscape screening and standards. On this subdivision, and the development regulations does not actually require that, so that should I hope that would resolve the issue from last time.
So let me ask you, so are there any waivers required for this?
believe that they have three. So the landscape and screening standards would not apply. They did submit that. Erosion control standards and stormwater management would still apply.
Okay, so we got a waiver request in our packet. We have the waiver request that was completed by the applicant, but you're telling us administratively it's not necessary. for
Correct.
this. All right. And so the waiver requests that we do have are for Appendix D, erosion control, and Appendix C, stormwater, and we have those letters, which I'm sure the applicant can address, because they have done so in the letters. And I noticed that we have full-size plans that have been received addressing all of the issues. So do I understand all of the comments that we have seen on this case from Megan have now, not from this case, from this plan, have
been
now
corrected.
have been addressed with this November 22nd full-size plan
Yes, that is correct.
submission? So at this point, there is no need for anything further to be done for Megan's satisfaction.
From my understanding, that is correct, yes, after speaking with Megan.
But we did not accept this last time because of the application issues, correct?
Correct.
And the waiver issues will need to be addressed in regards to the application.
Correct.
And I know, Jonathan, I talked to you a little bit about this, that we talked about whether or not the house needed to be shown on this plan because this was a site plan, correct?
That is correct. There's
I
one.
mean, a subdivision, not a site plan.
Right. There is one existing home structure there now, and then they corrected that to show the building envelope on the other.
Okay. I would just say that I think that my comment from, just for you and I before we hear from the applicant, I still think putting the house on there as it is dangerous for the applicant, because I think it does create a presumption that that is where the house is going to go. And it doesn't look like an envelope to me. It looks like a duplex with sides and a deck and all sorts of stuff on it. But-
Well,
Oh, on the new plans,
yeah, on the new one, it should have been corrected.
Okay, that's right, I'm sorry, I'm looking at
No
the
problem.
memo. Thank you. All right, so does anybody have any questions for Jonathan on this before we proceed with this?
Is the application complete?
Yes.
I move that it be accepted, that we waive any, we grant the waivers solely for acceptance purposes, and we find it has no regional impact.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. All right, at this point, I'd ask the applicant to come forward. Thank you.
The action we take is to accept it.
Good evening. I'm Joe Wickard. I'm here tonight on behalf of the John J. Stankiewicz Family Trust. Subject property is lot 11 on tax map 21. It currently, as you mentioned, is an existing single-family residence, which is 520 Mass Road. And as the lot's configured, it has 45,652 square feet. The existing house is serviced by municipal sewer and water, which are available in Mass Road. Property also has 404 feet of frontage on Marion Street. On Marion Street, the actual limit of the existing water main, which is a Manchester Water Works main, goes to about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down. The sewer line actually does not go down Marion Street, but there is a stub in the manhole that's at the intersection. So Steve Kazusko from my office was here last month for the meeting, and there were a couple issues on our part that caused some concerns. So what we're looking at, I think, is relatively straightforward. So we'll go into, the intent is to create one new building lot. We're showing it as lot 11-1 on that plan. It's a 23,573 square foot lot. Leaves a 22,079 square foot lot. Property is owned RSBO2 with either municipal sewer or water requirement is 20,000. So the lot complies with it. We have done a test bit on the new lot, as that lot needed state subdivision approval. It was, we submitted there's a test bit log on the side of the plan. very good test pit, pretty much all pure sand. Obviously, because the existing house is connected to municipal sewer and water, no state subdivision approval is required. As part of the application, after dealing with Manchester Water Works, the applicant is going to take the edge of the existing water main and has to extend it to the end of the property, or 13 feet past the end of the property, into McElroy Street, and that's just the standard Manchester Water Works policy. So we can go into some of the items I guess caused some concern on last hearing. The way we read your ordinance, we had to show the driveways, so we did show the driveways. Trying to be overthink, I guess, what I did was, as we're asking for waivers on your erosion control and stormwater management plan, and trying to kind of illustrate that it'd be a relatively small impact on the lot, we showed the house. So we have since removed those two items from the plan, but I do have the old one underneath it if you want to see it. Currently, the property's under agreement, so that house plan is similar to what's going to be built. Whether it's exactly there or not, we're not sure. When Steve was here last time, we had put the waiver, we did one form for the 3 requests that was asked to be broken out separately. We did, and as Jonathan's advised, we do not need a waiver for Appendix F. We had eliminated some of the notes. This was a involuntarily merged parcel. We eliminated that. It's being treated as a straight subdivision, no mention of a lot line adjustment. We did show the D line just for informational purposes. When we submitted this plan back on the 20th, we did not have state subdivision approval. Subsequent to that, the state has approved it. So there is a state subdivision approval. I think the town has it, but certainly we have a copy here as well. So that's approved. We did add, we added a benchmark as requested by DPW, labeled the storm drains. We had a note, just a standard for reference only, say the municipality. We've eliminated that. On the first plan that we gave you, we did not have the wetland scientist stamp on the plan, but there was a report submitted. There are no wetlands on the property. As we had time, the wetland scientist has since stamped the plan, and we've added his certification to it. I believe, if you want us to go over the waiver request, we certainly can, but I think if you looked at, in the comments, staff comments, Megan had addressed it. So pretty much what we're looking for is a stormwater management plan, a waiver on the stormwater management plan. It's a 1-lot infill subdivision. The proposed plan would be to create a duplex with 2 driveways. As you can see from the topography on the lot, it's a fairly flat lot, so we don't have a lot of issue with runoff or shedding and causing an impact to the abutters. As Megan mentioned, there is a catch basin here at the intersection of McElroy and Marion, and there's also one in front of the parking area for the existing residents. So I believe just during normal construction process, when the builder is going through it, we should be, if they take the normal steps, everything should be fine. I think that's the same argument that we would make in regards to the erosion control standards. Typically we'd be more involved with erosion control standards if we had an issue on a lot with a slope and there'd be a problem of runoff, but this is such a flat lot, even if there were to be a rain during the construction process, we don't really envision a lot of damage from sheet flow. But if they are excavating, the contractor will have to take the necessary care and make sure that they use the best management practices. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them. And I appreciate your patience.
Questions from the board? I'm not seeing any. So it would appear we have two waiver requests that need to be addressed. It does appear that the applicant has stated fairly clearly as to the lot itself, given the contours of the lot and the access to water and sewer and the size of this lot, that a waiver should certainly be at least considered by the board. And other than that, I am not hearing any issues with anybody in regards to the plan. Driveway permits will need to be issued for DBW as they would with any lot. Building permit would need to be done through the department, again, as with any lot. And the lot does not require waiver as to any size requirements of our zoning ordinance. So, I think the issue becomes whether or not the grounds for acceptance of the waiver requests have been met.
Do you want to open it for public comment before we?
I just wanted to make sure there were no more questions from the board members. Okay. All right, so I think we have a pretty good idea of where we are. At this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. This is a public hearing on a subdivision request in regards to 520 Mast Road. The subdivision itself would be on Marion Street, and this deals with tax map 21, lot 11-1. Is there any member of the public here that would like to make a comment on this application? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and come back to my board. Jim?
I move that we grant, I'll do it as combined, a motion, the waiver request, and find that the granting the waiver will not affect the purpose and intent of the regulations. Strict application of these regulations would cause practical difficulty.
Second Jim's motion.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the two waiver requests say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries unanimously.
However, I have a question, though, on that. If you read, this is on page 40, any waiver granted shall be shown on the final plan. Have we been requiring that?
Yes, we have.
So I guess the question is that if that has to be shown on the final plan, I don't recall reading that. And my guess is they wanted to get this signed.
No, I think we don't have a Mylar for you this evening.
Oh, you don't? Okay, so you can add it.
Typically, we do this and we'd set the corners and bring it back.
Okay. And you'll get rid of the pending on note 8,
Yes. We'll add the state subdivision code.
what the final.
And we will also add the waivers that
So apparently, the applicant will come back with that marked on the plan. Jim?
Well, if no one else has any problems or discussion, I'd like to make a motion to approve the plan, number 6. We have number 6 on our recommendations, subject to the following conditions, A, 1 through 7.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we want to add the changes that you just listed on the plan?
Well, those would be,
Are they incorporated into this?
I think they're administrative. But if you want to add them, if you want to add those changes, I'll add it to my motion if you thought.
Well, I think that number 6, which requires them to meet them, requires them to put that they got the waiver on the plan.
And note number 1 says to include any waivers, conditions, et cetera.
Okay. I'm good.
All right. So did I call for a vote on that? I
Not yet.
didn't. We got a second to the motion. I got
second
close to getting your hands in the air. There was a second.
Who seconded the motion?
Tim made it. Jim,
second.
all right, Jim is seconding it. Thank you, Jim. I think I just forced you into that. Any further discussion on the
I've
motion?
been forced into worse situations.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're all set.
Somebody should explain to Chet the procedure we just followed, but that was the quiz on 676, section 4.
Okay, did you have a question? No? All right. All right. Next, we have the zoning and development reg workshop. Jonathan, do we have a follow-up to what we talked about last time?
No.
I like a person who answers a question, Jonathan, so thank you. What is your, just so we know, we got our packet for next week. We have the meeting for next week. And I'm sure the reason that that has not been gotten to is because you haven't been able to get to it.
That's correct.
What is the status in the budget for staffing and planning for next year?
We are currently looking for a planning and zoning administrator. Right now, it expires 16th, and so we're hoping to get somebody on board for that before the,
I see our selectmen's rep nodding his head. So when you say expires, you
Did you
mean a
say-
time period for application?
yeah, the application closing ends on the 16th, excuse me.
Okay. Tim, you had a question?
Did you include planning in that phrase just now? I thought you were the planning.
No, the zoning code enforcement, excuse me if I spoke.
You said planning and zoning administrator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So used
Oh,
to
man, I
saying
just got
both
myself-
titles.
You just fired yourself.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
This side of the room got a little excited when you said that.
Excuse me.
I wanted to just correct your statement for the
Thank you.
record.
I appreciate that very much for looking out for my own job. The zoning code enforcement individual we're looking for
Zoning.
right now.
Code enforcement.
Okay, as I know that does take up a lot of your time in the office. So Jonathan approached us with the forms. Have you received any word of any petitions for zoning changes or for any changes for the ballot this year?
As of right now, we have not received any.
And when is the deadline for those?
14th.
The 14th, okay.
Next Wednesday.
Tim?
Well, I didn't submit it to John, but I did write up what I thought we should consider
Okay.
for the minimum standards for landscaping, under Section 2 of the landscaping and screening plans. I don't know if anybody has their paperwork from last week. I used mine as a template and worked off of it. It's on page 68 in our regulation book. Somebody's looking for a page number.
Thank you.
So, under Section 2, Landscaping and Screening Plan, number 2A, minimum standard for landscaping. I left the first sentence, the first actual sentence in A completely intact except for the last two words, lot area. So what I propose is we reword that to state something on the line of, the minimum landscaping requirements for all commercial, industrial, institutional, and religious development shall be 1 tree and 2 shrubs per 5,000 square feet of total. And then I'm adding, area to be disturbed and developed by the proposed project. Any easement areas which may be disturbed or developed by the project are to be excluded from the square foot calculation. So if that's clear and precise, I'm good. If someone wants to suggest changes to the wording, I'm happy to.
I think I would ask that the easement language be clarified to be access easements. I mean,
Okay.
property can have lots of easements for lots of
You know,
reasons.
like a public
Access easement?
Power line easement.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have sewer easement too.
Okay, so access easement is the word I just wrote in there.
Does anybody know how 1 tree and 2 shrubs for 5,000 square feet of area compares to other communities? Because quite frankly, that doesn't seem to be a huge amount to me.
Well, I do have some questions to add later. I just want them for discussion purposes.
All right, and then my other question is, you said of disturbed and developed area.
Yeah, because if you're going to disturb the area and then develop it as part of an overall project, I think that's the area that we should be looking at square footage calculations for. So if someone comes in with a 12-acre lot and they're going to make a half acre's worth of improvements, we shouldn't run our formula on 12 acres like we've been routinely giving waivers for these applicants, because it is excessive to take that number and run it that far out.
And so what is the difference in your mind between disturbed and developed?
I call them one and the same because if you disturb the area, it's part of a development. So if you think we should differentiate with a single word, I would yield to that, but
That would be my preference.
a single word, developed area?
Well,
Well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, I think maybe we need to keep both of them to keep the parameters in. I was thinking that you might disturb areas in order to develop.
That's right.
Okay, Jim?
that's fine, I don't care. I do have a question on the tree and shrub. This is one tree, is it additional trees and shrubs? Because they're going to point to the back woods and say, I got 1,000 trees back there.
Well, this is, if you, the ordinance states it's new plantings, if you go on through, it does state it is new plantings on, when you go into the plant material section as part of it, you go to, where did I read it? Well, I suppose then we should make sure it's perfectly clear that existing trees and shrubs don't count in the calculation.
But what if the existing trees and shrubs are within the disturbed area?
Then I don't think they count to the whole purpose of the ordinance is to add landscaping to improve the look of a property that's being developed. If they have 5 trees on the lot, I don't think they should get, we've already routinely discussed this about people being denied that. I already had 5 trees. Well, it doesn't count. You're adding to what you're doing. Because certainly when you're developing a site, it's pretty rare that you don't cut at least a few trees when you develop a site. Unless it's a field lot, and then we would like to encourage planting of trees. So just to go on to what Barbara started.
Well, so, just, Tim, if I can follow up on what you're talking about, where you said later it's new, and I think this might be where some of the confusion for some of our applicants has come in as to whether or not they needed to add anything because they met the minimum requirements, because they had the stuff. Is it the minimum landscaping requirements shall be newly planted
Well, that's a good,
trees and shrubs at the, as calculated by 1 and 2 per 5,000 of,
that's good wording. I like it.
because I think that may have led to some of the confusion on a recent application, because I'm not sure if I read that it tells me I have to plant anything.
That's the right word.
So would you add it into the sentence structure, Barbara, or would you try to create a separate sentence to state that plantings must be new plantings? Because it doesn't work grammatically if you put it afterward shall be.
Well, I mean, I think the grammar can all be worked out after we actually see a draft of it. I'm not so worried about that.
So I'm
But I
gonna-
think that's what we're intending, right? Is that we're talking about a tree and 2 shrubs that were not there for a disturbed area.
So I've just added the words newly planted to
Yeah, I
the,
mean, I think it gives us the idea. And so we have the minimum landscaping requirements for all, for new things per area, and then we'll see what the rest of it is. The
So-
other thing we talked about was whether or not we needed a minimum standard.
that was my next point.
Okay, all right.
So my question was, should we create a minimum standard for lots that are calculated at less than 10,000 square feet? And 10,000 square feet is only 100 by 100, which is a fairly small area. So I don't know if we would ever get something that's that small.
Less than a quarter of an acre.
Is that a quarter an acre?
Well,
Ron?
what's the size of the lot we just created?
Acre's 44,000.
So we just did 20,000 square foot lots.
3,000.
So I have a question is, should we create it, and I had number of trees, number of shrubs, should we set it at 3 and 6, or something based on a quorum here that people agree on? So I was thinking that for anything less than 10,000 square feet, we would talk about 3 trees and 6 shrubs. That would be an absolute minimum for less than 10,000 square feet. Which is not a costly thing, and most people are going to try to landscape their property and make it look nice anyway. And I don't think it would create an undue burden or hardship financially for someone to be required to do that. And they still can ask for a waiver. Waivers are still part of the program.
If we're,
Unless you stated that the minimum standard was a non-waivable standard, and that would be,
well, you can always waive, though. I mean, that's
Right.
that's in the ordinance. So it's based on the square feet of disturbed area now, not
Right.
total lot size.
right. So it's gonna drastically reduce the landscaping and screening requirements for applicants by changing it to that wording. And I think we'll have a lot less waiver requests when you actually ask them to landscape based on the area that they're going to disturb as part of their project, to develop their property.
Well, but let's run this further, because I think we just heard about a lot that, let's say, we granted a landscape waiver, and basically, it was twice the minimum standard that you're talking about, 20,000, we just said. And they said, hey, it's essentially a vacant lot, and let the homeowner do what he wants.
But it says in our standards, commercial, industrial, institutional, and religious. It doesn't say
Right, right.
residential.
Which is why they said it was not applicable, all right?
So these-
But I'm just using that as a lot size example, that's 20,000.
Right.
So if we had something then come on to this lot that was of a commercial,
Yep.
so that it applied,
They would have to plant 5 trees because they would have gone over the 20,000 mark. They would fall between 20 and 25, so they'd have to do 5 trees and 10 shrubs. That's still not a hardship. And once again, you can ask for a waiver for 3 trees and 6. I don't care what they want, it's up to them to ask for the waiver. And if they can, show that that it would be, they already have a lot of trees on the site and it wouldn't, not really necessary, then we can grant the waivers based on our individual requests.
Tim, where on the plan do they show the extent of the disturbed area?
It's a good point.
how do you do that calculation?
I think they would have to depict it on the plan. We'd have to ask for it to be
If a
depicted.
builder was super efficient, it might be 5 feet wider than the foundation.
Except that they have to
But
drive.
how do we know that?
We don't. So I think, once again, we still rely on honesty when we deal with applicants.
Well, I do think that it does create an issue of arguing over what the section of the lot is that is happening. And David's point is well made, I think.
It is well made, but I think that we should, I'm trying to find a way to be a little more reasonable with these folks for their landscaping requirements and not
I
use.
actually heard that our landscaping requirements are pretty light compared to other towns, so.
If we think it's fine and we don't want to change it, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Well,
It's
I
just a
think that
discussion.
things like newly planted, we clearly need to do some work on the landscaping, because there's clearly confusion about how to calculate it and what to do, so we need to do something. Jim, you look like,
Well, that's part of the issue. It's the new plantings, and I don't like to create regulations or an ordinance that requires us to sort of be subjectively judgmental each time we look at it. What's the disturbed area? I don't know, whatever number we make up. It's a hard way to enforce rules. The advantage of hard and fast rules, at least the rule is clear. You can then waive it, but you don't argue about whether it applies. This is really applicable to site plans, not subdivisions. Subdivision doesn't create a use, it just creates a land
right,
area.
right.
Which in the thing we just saw, the
Subdivision.
that was just a subdivision anyway, but it's also the use wasn't within the categories. I don't know.
Well, I think that on a site plan, Jim, if you look at a site plan, the applicant comes in with where the driveways are going to be, where the slopes are going to be changed for the contours. They show the contour changes on the slopes. They show parking areas. Anywhere that they show that there's going to be a change in the terrain in order to accommodate building and parking, I would call that a simple calculation. It's 200 by 700.
All right, but let's talk about the lot that's down on 114A, where we are finally seeing the car place. I'm assuming we approved a car place. That's
One bay garage,
No, I'm talking about the old Drisher sign lot.
Yes.
Okay.
O'Reilly's.
All right,
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly. Is that what it's called? I couldn't remember.
It's O'Reilly's Auto
I
Parts.
couldn't remember which auto parts store it was. So it's O'Reilly's, coming soon to your neighborhood, which we're very happy about. But there's a site that has been completely disturbed in regards to the construction that's going on. However, for a plan, if I was to look at it, I'm not going to see a complete disturbance of that site. I'm going to see the building footprint, I'm going to see the parking, and I'm going to see maybe some access, avenues. So when I look at that lot on a plan, there's parts of it that are not disturbed, that are clearly being disturbed in the course of the construction. So does that count as the disturbance for planting purposes?
One is considered temporary disturbance in order to accommodate the building, but the other one is a fact that where the building is going to go and the parking lots are going to go. I think that's the line in the sand.
But I guess from a planning perspective, if the point of my landscaping requirement, which is a valid requirement and is we can legally do, is to improve the aesthetics of the lot, if somebody takes down half of the landscaping on a lot because they don't want to have to deal with the maintenance, and then puts a building on a quarter of that, do I just require now the plantings for that area of the building and the driveway? Because I think under your proposal, that would be what the requirement would be.
Yes,
That's
if
the
they remove vegetation and stump and strip and do all that kind of earthwork, yeah, that becomes part of the calculation.
But that's just disturbed area.
That's right.
So then how do I deal with that? Because under your proposal,
The disturbed area extends to the limits of the work on the site, from side to side and front to back. That's disturbed area. And it includes
whether it's temporary or not.
Well, if it's taken out as a part of the recourse of the lot, then you have to use that as a square footage calculation. If the guy just parks his truck over on the grass over there for a month while they're doing the work, then I don't think that that's a valid place to argue over square footage.
I think we're going to run into, my read on that is that we're going to run into problems.
We already have problems with what we have, so I'm just trying to find a way to get away from it.
I understand, I appreciate your suggestion. Why don't you have a number of things here, Tim, let's see,
Okay, I want to move down the page 68, down to minimum standards for screening. We've had issues with a plan that shows a tree 10 years from now and what it actually looks like. So I wrote something up briefly that states, landscape trees and shrubs depicted on the landscape design plan should show 10-year growth prediction as well as day one planting depictions to ensure that landscape screening standards are understood and modifications can be required if the plan does not meet the spirit and intent of the regulation. We see these beautiful plans with all these overlapping circles for trees that are screening, except what those are projected 10-year growth pattern of a tree. And then when the project is done, you go out and you look, and they're all one here and one over there, and they're about this big around. So there is no actual screening from day one. And we've promised our constituents that we are going to protect their property by requiring screening standards when they get no screening at all for a minimum of 10 years, or maybe not at all, because one of my other sections is about plants that are dying and not being replaced, which is another subject for another section. So I think we need to find a way to find out what the trees are going to look like the day they put them in, so that if we see that they're 10 feet apart, and we've promised the people who cross the street are not going to get headlight wash, that we're going to provide them with adequate screening, that maybe we require they use a different plant, or they plant them in a different pattern or something, to actually provide the screening that's in the minimum standard for screening section.
Have a qu-
Go ahead,
Just
Bill.
something on that, though. What if we consider on the size of the trees, if the trees, as, you know, the projected 10-year growth and the size of the trees that are going to be there, if they're looking at a projected 10-year growth to obtain that screening, that, and we require a temporary type of screen to shield the headlights, so that that doesn't have to be a high-cost type of screening that has to be maintained because it goes with the site plan, but it will last, the intent of that might be 8 to 10 years, so that that screen, that fencing, that headlight shielding is in place until the trees take over.
Good alternative. As I remember, we talked with the Cumberland Farms when they did their screening. They put up a low wall to protect the lights from washing onto the neighbors across the street, right in the village, side of the old Exxon station.
Right.
You put up a temporary one? I don't remember.
No, they put up
No.
they put up a mortar and
If your
stone
car-
Oh,
wall.
I know, I'm familiar
Right.
with the property.
But I'm saying
Well,
that-
I thought he was talking about
But-
temporary, and that's
Well,
permanent.
Well, he's
Right.
talking about, they came in with an alternative, but I guess it would depend on the particular site, because they may not want a wall in there for the look. They may want the trees, but we have the issue with the headlight wash, and we have, you know, you can only put the size of the trees in there. My only concern with having the projected 10-year and the current size of the trees, then you get into the argument, well, instead of having the trees this size, why don't you just put trees in that are already 3 feet in diameter? And I don't know,
Well, that would be a day one tree, Phil.
I understand, but what you mentioned, you know, sometimes you get the little planting like this, or what the size of the planting, unless you address it as the size of the plantings, but it's all going to depend on the soil that's there, the amount of sunlight, whether it's on the north side of something or it's on the south side of something, what type of shrub you put in there, as to, is it going to go straight and narrow, is it going to be a
Well, I
full
think-
type of
Thank you, Phil,
shrub?
but I think that is Tim's point, is that he wants the developer to make the person presenting the plan to make a representation so that I think the Shell station is probably a good example of where something like that might play in, where it shows what do the trees planted look like on day one as compared to what should they be looking like now, well more than 10 years later. And I think of the Irving Station on the corner of Henry Bridge, where they have those plantings on the corner there, not so much shielding, but I remember those were obviously smaller when they went in, but there was some representations made as to how big they were made. I mean, I think sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't. So Tim, why don't you talk about the replacement piece, because that sort of.
Yeah, that
plays
goes
into
to, if you go on page 60, say page 70. It's under the plant material, section floor, plant material, and it's letter D, maintenance. So, the paragraph reads, begins with the owner, and but you make it all the way down to landscape material. Oh, plants and landscape, other landscape material, which is the last sentence in the paragraph. So plants and other landscape material, and all screening shall be maintained in proper repair and shall, that's when I added, be replaced as needed due to death for a period of, and I have an open spot there for how many years we would require, after the project has been completed and the certificate of occupancy has been issued. And then the last part of the sentence is, and shall be kept clear of refuse and debris. So what I'm trying to add into that section is a guarantee that under the maintenance agreement, that if they die, they're going to replace them, because it doesn't clearly say. It says they'll be kept healthy, neat, and orderly. It doesn't say they have to replace them if they die, because any screening is part of the site plan, and if it dies, it needs to be replaced, and we don't specifically state that.
What about a tree bond?
Pardon me? I
A
didn't.
tree bond.
No.
Well,
So I have a blank for years, whether it's a 5-year requirement or a 10-year requirement. In my mind, it should be for the life of the project, because you represented it for the project for approval, well, it should stay there. But projects change owners, people forget, things change, so. But I think we need to clearly state that they should be replaced if they die, which we don't.
Okay, I guess you sort of walked right into what my question was. If you have a valid site plan and it's operating, why would there be any time limit on it? Unless
There
they
you go.
came in to change the plan and eliminate the landscaping. I mean, I guess
That would, yeah.
That's the way I've been understanding it, where if it comes to my attention that they're in violation of their approved site plan, including landscaping, that needs to be resolved.
you're not looking at the date the plan was approved to
Correct.
see whether they still have to have it. You just are looking to see whether it's met.
Right.
So, a period of blank years is not going to be needed. It should be for the term of the site plan, for the term of the,
Well, I think the issue is maintained in proper repair. My idea of what proper repair of my azalea bush is very different of what a horticulturist's view of what proper repair would be. I think the idea is that you want it to be maintained as to species and size in accordance with the site plan, right?
so then we could add right after proper repair, be replaced as needed due to death. You don't have to put a site limit on it, just as long as it states that they need to be replaced.
Doesn't it always say that plants that are not in sound growing condition or are dead shall be removed and replaced?
Where did I see, where did I miss that,
It's
John?
right, it's right in maintenance.
In D, in maintenance.
Okay. So it is in there, I missed it. My fault. I think I was looking, the reason why I put on there, because I wanted to put a time frame in there, and I guess I overlooked the fact that it was already written, so.
Do we have a scientist with us that can tell me whether species would cover a number of plants in the same biological family, so that having it be of the same species would allow you to replace it with?
Family,
Huh?
genus.
Genus.
Yes.
So, sorry, run through that again?
A tree is a tree.
Phylum, family, genus.
Okay. So that's the lower level identifier, so it should be the same plant. Okay.
Well, then that's all I have,
Very
Barbara,
impressed
thank
by
you.
I took an awful lot of biology in college,
What did your wife teach?
chemistry.
Oh, that's right, she was chemistry. I knew she was the science. All right.
Well, thank you, I'm good.
Okay. So I think what we're talking,
If I could-
one thing that you brought up, just to recap what Tim has talked about, is the issue of a temporary screening, showing things on the plan as planted and as they're intended to be. And we need to address this sort of disturbed, developed, what are we basing our calculation on? With the idea of having a minimum lot size if you have a smaller lot, just having a minimum requirement, so we don't even have to get into it. David?
I want to go back to Tim's item on replacement of dead trees, or dead plantings. How long does this requirement be enforced?
According to what John said, it's for the life of the site.
So, 20 years down the road, a tree dies, now it's quite mature, it has to be replaced.
Doesn't have to be replaced with a like size, it has to be
Just
replaced with
replaced.
another tree.
Yes, that reminds me of my son's property in Florida. Every tree, no matter what size it is, it can't be removed until there's a guarantee it's going to be replaced.
Well, the only reason I state it, Dave, is because,
Do we have enough enforcement capability to
no,
observe
because
that?
anybody who's been on this board more than 10 minutes can ride around town and look at approvals that we've given and see that some of the approvals we give don't even get followed up on, and they don't even meet the plan that was signed. And that's shame on us. That's the way it is. But
That's why they have a new position for code enforcement officers. Been
so,
taken-
Dave, what I'm simply stating that if as a condition of approval, you agree to plant 10 trees and 20 shrubs because you want to get your project passed and you want to get this thing done, you own that for the life of the project. And
Well, I
you-
don't think David was
No, he's not. It's-
contesting what you said. I think he
He's
was
just making
saying
a
it
point.
happens in
I'm just
Florida.
reiterating my
Yes,
statement.
and the situation I was remarking on Florida is, it's not this city ordinance. It's, tree doesn't necessarily have to be on any plan.
Mhm.
It's just, you're prohibited from cutting a tree until the town approves that it's been dead.
Right.
And then you have a guarantee it's going to be replaced. That's a rather rough standard.
Mhm.
So if you want employment certifying that things are dead, go to Florida.
Have tree police down there?
They do.
Tim,
I have one more thing that's not related to what we were just talking about.
all right,
When you're ready.
all right, does anybody else have anything on the landscaping or other regulations? Tim, I want to thank you for the time on this. This has caused us some problems. I think it is somewhat confusing to the applicants, and I think our own discussion about it helps to highlight how as much as you might think you clearly write things, when they're looked at afterwards, you can always find points that could use clarification or perhaps rewording. Jonathan?
I did sit down and Meg and I spoke about the development regulations as a whole, and she suggested at some point if we wanted to, since it's been a long time since we've completely revamped them, DPW has some engineering consulting firms on retainer in theory that if the desire and the ability and the money came available, that we could potentially have a consultant look and maybe review and revise kind of an outside look at what we're looking at to make sure that what we're doing is clear and what may work in other communities may not work in other communities and what may or may not work for us.
Well, I mean, I guess I would hope that Megan, and I understand that she has the same job constraints that you do, might be able to tell us what works and what she finds works and what doesn't work. So I think, yeah, we need, again, these are things that are of an administrative nature. These changes that we're talking about do not need to go on the ballot in March. So we are waiting to see if there are any petitioned warrant articles that may come in. But if not, it may be for the first time in many years that people will go to a ballot in March and not have zoning changes proposed. Jim?
Well, you usually like to have at least one on the ballot every year so people get used to voting yes. Because once you lose that momentum, they do, you know. People, they say every year they're going to vote automatically for.
Especially when the very first item is, a $20 million issue.
That's right, yeah. Anyway, so we should come up with something. We're going to run out of time. But one thing we did talk about was Appendix G, Design Review Guidelines, which is different from requirements. And we have talked before about how do we add some teeth to that?
Right.
And the problem is you can't have a one-size-fits-all for buildings, but they're not very strong. They're hard to enforce now because of this guideline.
Okay.
I don't have an answer.
All right. Jonathan, you're sort of looking at what Jim is talking about?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so make sure that's on your list. Tim, you had something else.
Yeah, and our zoning ordinances, page 25, supplemental standards. Section 5.1 is accessory buildings and facilities. What I'm wondering about is what I'm going to ask you, is it included in what we already have listed in here? I'm noticing a lot of residents buying these sort of like tent garages that have aluminum poles and an arch, and they
Yeah.
string the plastic up
Assessing
and over.
has been dealing with that for a while.
And does that come under private garages, carports, non-commercial greenhouses, and workshops? Because I believe that this is a very inexpensive way for residents to cover their equipment and tractors and cars. And is it going to apply to our setback requirements and rules and regulations? Or are we going to be dealing with, well, not we will, but zoning enforcement will be dealing with these kind of buildings being set right up against a stone wall on the property line? Because that's where I'd like to keep my farm tractor over there. I don't really want to look at it. I want to keep it over there out of the way.
Well, I think, Jonathan, why don't you check with assessing if you don't already know, because I think you might find that there's already been some sort of a determination as to the temporary nature of those buildings and whether they are apply to a
They do
permit.
get permits.
If it's less than 200 square feet, they do not need a permit, but they are still required to follow setbacks and things
It
like that.
says here, shall not exceed a maximum cumulative building footprint of 600 square feet in our zoning.
The 200 square foot is
The minimum
International
size.
Business, building code and residential code.
But if you look at the definition of building, in the definition section, the small Roman numeral 3 at the beginning,
What page, Jim?
of page, it's Roman numeral 3, right at the beginning.
I remember those. Go ahead.
The word building includes the word structure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Term building shall include structures of permanent or temporary construction, plastic or canvas-covered frame structures, etc.
Good, so
So
we
the
do,
answer
we do
would be-
have it in there.
It is, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And assessing does, when they're aware of that,
Yeah.
they add it to the,
Right.
Okay, as long as we're covered, that's all I wanted to ask about. Thank you, Jim.
Other questions or comments or concerns from the boards in regards to either our zoning ordinance or development regulations? All right. Go ahead, Jim.
This just struck me, I see now. 5.4 tattoo parlors. We have a limitation on proximity to other tattoo parlors. That was probably written in a day when they weren't as ubiquitous as they are now. Is that still something that we want to have in? My capitalist instinct is you shouldn't restrict competition. On the other hand, the aesthetic side of it is you don't want too many of certain uses, but is that the right way to do it? Spread them out by, rather than...
I don't know that that has been an issue for quite a while in town, so it probably was written some time ago,
Yeah,
because I
I'm sure
don't
it was.
think it's been an issue.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about this. In fact, I don't think it was, I don't know when it was done. It's an odd way to do land use planning.
Has that been an issue for you, Jonathan?
we've had a few people inquire about businesses of that nature, and it would be tough to find a location that would be suitable under those regulations.
Now, one of the goals has been to develop nodes with dense development and not spread it out. But then you have a rule like that, and that compels spreading out.
Do we
What it
have-
is to restrict its use. I mean, it's,
Do we have the same criteria for other industries?
I think we
Say,
did one for gas stations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
gas stations.
yeah.
Those you can maybe better defend because of the risk of leaks and stuff. But,
A fast food restaurant?
yeah, I mean, how do you, at what point do you start saying, well,
So would you suggest that we reduce that 1,000 square feet or eliminate it?
I would eliminate it, and if you don't like the use, don't allow the use, but
Then the abutters and or persons who come in to public comment.
I think the only issue I might have with that is that that puts that administratively on me. And not that that would be an issue if I'm directed to do something such as that. But in order to make them come with a site plan, it needs to be an increased intensity and things of that nature. So if it's not, then it would just be carte blanche for whoever to just move in to a potential location.
well, if nobody's complaining, I don't like it sort of conceptually, but I'm not a great advocate of tattoo parlors either. So.
Could this receive a variance from the zoning board of adjustment?
They'll give a variance to anything.
So in other words, even if it's written at 1,000 square feet, it could be, the variance could be for 300 feet, theoretically, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
So why don't we leave it up to the ZBA to
Well-
adjudicate it, not us?
Well, I mean, I understand Jim's point, but I also note the consistency to 5.3. And so it's not that I don't think it's a discussion we should have, but I don't think we should bring it up in the context of proposing perhaps one change to an ordinance that clearly has a couple components to it and is related and is not causing an issue when there is an avenue for an applicant to have the requirements of the zoning ordinance not apply if the issue arises. It doesn't sound like anything's even gotten close to that point as
Yeah,
far as
I'm-
inquiries at your office, Jonathan.
I've had 2 people inquire about it since I've been here, and I informed them that they could go before the ZBA, and they have not.
That's fine, I'm not pushing, I'm
Okay.
just commenting on what I thought was a,
While we're on that, should we have the text corrected so that it reads the same as the ones above it, where it is written 1,000 and then the 1,000 is in parentheses? Because that's not how the tattoo parlor is written.
I don't, I.
Does that
I'm
mean
not,
anything?
for an administrative
No.
change, I'm not
I
gonna
wouldn't
have
worry
a
about it.
zoning ordinance change.
Just want to make sure it is all consistent.
Doesn't have to be.
Well, that's fine.
In fact, I just do numbers, nobody reads words anymore.
I could even go further, but I won't. All right.
Okay.
Anything else tonight for consideration in regards to these ordinance regs? Jonathan, realistically, do you think you're gonna be able to get to the forms that we were looking at by next week? And what do we have on our agenda for next week?
I don't think I'll be able to finalize the forms that we were.
Sure, that's
discussing.
fine, okay.
On the agenda next week, there are 4, 1 old business and 3 new. I believe the Fletcher property is asking to be continued, that's the old business, and they're gonna have a representative here to discuss
Okay.
if any questions come up.
Okay.
And then
So
the
that
other-
one's going to be a request for continuance next week?
To the 26th of January.
Okay.
And then the other additional ones, so we've got 2 subdivisions, I believe, and then a conceptual.
Okay. All right. David, did you have
We
something?
could go back to all the way. We accept
Does
them for-
anybody else have any
continuing.
business for tonight's board meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Actually, I'm sorry,
Oh,
I
sorry,
do
John.
have one. Just
You're
to
not
follow up
fast.
the,
He wasn't seconded, so you're safe, so.
There was a letter about a property from Ray Shea.
Right.
Yes.
and-
Oh, it was part of our packet.
Yes, and also to follow up with that, the lift has been removed.
Oh, it has been.
Has been removed.
Okay.
The lift's been
The
removed?
lift has been removed, yes.
All right.
The issue's asphalt.
Correct.
Okay, so the condition of our approval was that the lift be removed and the asphalt be done, I think it was December 1st or something close to that. So the question for the board is that, do you think we need to take any formal action in regards to the fact that paving has not been completed as approved? Tim?
So based on what I read in the letter, the applicant seems to be delaying the opening of the project, so we could stipulate that the paving needs to be done prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, and that would suffice everything, I think.
Well, I guess the question is, it is part of the plan approval that we have done. I have not, have I signed those plans?
Don't believe you've signed those yet. I don't think I've received final
But
copies.
the work doesn't have to be completed. You're just authorizing the work to be done if you sign the plan, right?
Correct.
So you could sign it and the work hasn't been done, and if you don't do it, they're revoke their site plan.
I guess my sense is that you could tell Mr. Shea that at this point, the board doesn't feel that anything needs to be done.
Action needs to be taken. at this time.
But obviously, occupancy permits aren't gonna be done until the paving is done, because you're
It's
gonna look at
condition of
the
approval.
approval, and it's a condition of approval.
And the
and-
inspections and everything else
Right.
as well, so. Okay,
All right, so I think
At
that's
this time, no
fine,
action is
and
needed.
thank the applicant for taking care of the lift issue.
I will do, thank you.
All right. Now, can I ask
I'm
for
finished.
Tim's motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I think that I'll take that as a second to Tim's motion that was held in abeyance while Jonathan updated us. This is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? It carries. We are adjourned. Good night, everybody. See you next week. Chet?